Hello and welcome to this industry session from the Ops Nest. We do these 3 times a year, a bit of a throwback to the time during COVID when we sent out a link and a message saying, let's learn while we're in these few weeks of lockdown. And when we switched to a subscription model, we always promised we'd do 3 industry sessions so that anybody and everybody could join in. We usually have a bit of a theme in the Ops Nest. So last year's theme was around innovation. This year's theme is all about transformation, because I don't know about you, but we talk a lot about change in the industry, and then sometimes we head on the show floor and it doesn't feel like it's changed that much from 20 or 30 years ago. So what we really wanted to talk about this year throughout the Ops Nest, we do this every week in the Ops Nest, our kind of theme is around, okay, what's actually changing? How do we actually change? Are we actually changing? What do we need to do to change? What does change look like? So we've got a few different activities going on throughout the year where we're talking about this topic. So first of all, I'd like to say a massive thank you to Unity, who host this session for us and do all the tech side of things. And we've got Bruce from Translatable, who have joined us this time to do our BSL interpretation and to ensure that our industry sessions are open to the widest possible audience that we can gather. So as viewers, there's no opportunity to come into this session to speak. However, if you've got any questions or comments or anything else, just pop those into the global chat and I'll pick them up as we go through. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself actually. I'm Luca Wanuka from the Ops Nest. This year, I'm coming up in maybe 2 months. Well, no, it's probably about now actually. It's my 30th anniversary of being in operations. And throughout that time, I've just learnt so much and I'm learning stuff all the time, even now. And I've asked 3 fabulous ops leaders in our industry to come into this session so I can learn a bit more, and hopefully you will do too. So we're going to start off with Corina. So Corina, thanks for joining us. Give us a bit of a heads up about who you are and where you come from.
I'm Safety, Security and Operations Director at Hyve Group, working across our NNG and portfolio of events, which is about 30 events that we have.
To keep you quite busy then. And then Liz, thanks also for joining us. Where are you currently? So you just landed somewhere.
I've just landed somewhere new, so I'm hoping that I can bring a lot of variety to this conversations, because operations spans across such a plethora of different activities. So I head up the strategic operations at Raccoon Media, which is a very enthusiastic, fresh growing, very naturally aggressive within the sports and lifestyle market, where we really just want to encourage everyone globally to make better decisions and to enjoy their activities. So I actually sit under the commercial umbrella, which is quite a different place to sit within operations. But I've had a range of experience. I've surpassed my 15th anniversary. So Lou, I learn a lot from Lou actually, across agency, exhibition operations, conference operations, change management, digital operations. If it's got operations next to it, I've either got curiosity against it or I've tried my best at dipping my toe into that water. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And then last but definitely not least, Miriam, thank you for joining us. Give us a bit of a heads up of where you sit in everything.
So I run a freelance operations company called Ways and Means Events, and we work across the spectrum. So we work with small independents who are launching for the first time, some never having set a foot inside a exhibition hall, all the way through to working with the likes of DMG, Hyve, Reed, all of that. So we run the spectrum, and like Liz, I think I've dipped my toes into most style of events. I've done conferences, public policy, indoor and outdoor, and now sort of doing a hybrid of trade events outdoor, which is a lot of fun, and like you, Lou, I think I am hitting 30 years. Neither of us look old enough. I do appreciate that.
Thank you. I think just from what the three of you have said, with my tuppence into the mix, I think the reason why I've asked you three specifically to join this session is that it's going to give us the biggest possible view. So we've got large corporate, we've got independent and entrepreneurial, and then we've got freelance entrepreneurial across both independent, large corporate as well, inside, outside, you name it. I think between the three of you and me in the mix, we've got a good perspective on operations. So let's get cracking. My first question is around, are we actually transforming? Because as I said in my kind of intro, sometimes I feel like we talk about change and then I step off on the show floor and I see the same behaviors, the same practices, the same stresses, the same crunch points that I've seen for the last 30 years. So I don't know the answer to my own question here. I'm really interested to get your perspective. Is ops transforming, or are we simply just absorbing more and more things? So, Corina, can I come to you first on this one? What do you think?
I mean, it's a super big question. I would say in terms of the thinking about are we absorbing, I would more refer to it as I think we're expanding. Health and safety and security has always been something that's been our responsibility. However, now with new legislation or more focus on the likes of safeguarding, accessibility, sustainability, crowd management, TPOP that's coming into the mix, the requirement for operations teams to understand local laws, local safety laws. It's a lot more detailed that, of the specialisms that we need to know. So I suppose it's more complex what we need to understand now and how we need to work, whilst we're always still running our events really the same way we've kind of always run them. I think there is a transformation in operations. Data is a lot more key, very key. The experience and the return on experience is vital. So that's where we've transformed from just delivery to understanding what we are delivering and the whys, and then the output that I suppose comes from that.
Can I just get you to clarify the TPOP just for anybody that doesn't understand the acronym?
The Protection of Premises Act that's come in. It was Martin's Law, Protect Duty at one point. It's been given different names. Now it's been named, and obviously the shortened down nickname is TPOP. And obviously that relates to a piece of security legislation that's come in that is in effect, and all of the UK events will need to be aware of that and whether they fit into the tier system and what they need to do. The venues will have ultimate responsibility, it looks like, but there are definitely things that organisers need to be aware of and keep on top of.
I think when you've been when you just went through that list, one of the things that kind of really flagged to me is that every time there's a change in legislation, there's another chunk of work that goes into the equation, but it also brings an opportunity for us to really assess what we're doing, doesn't it, and kind of review and look at how we can do something better. So I think every time there's a new sustainability thing that comes in, or accessibility, or like you say, around security, that really drives us to kind of step up and transform, doesn't it? Miri, let's come to you next. So the original question, is ops transforming, or are we just absorbing more? What do you think?
I think it's a case of both, to be honest. We are transforming, and that is allowing us to not necessarily, I think I agree with what Corina's saying, not necessarily absorb more, but expand more and sort of establish our role within the organisations. I think a huge amount of work has been done since I first started on the perception of ops and what ops can bring to the table. And I look at it as we are being more involved in those sorts of things than just being set to one side and being told, this is the event, go ahead and do it. So we have sort of put ourselves in that position quite rightly, so to be able to help and control and work to protect the events and help them expand, but in a logical way that is achievable rather than just sort of pie in the sky.
As you were saying that, it reminded me of my 30 years ago. It was 30 odd years ago. A lot of ops people came through from the administrative functions within entrepreneurial businesses that had an idea and ran an event like a Blenheim or something like that. And the ops people were kind of almost from that secretarial kind of pathway. And when I think now, 30 years on, that we feel like we're now quite far away from that.
I think I said when we were chatting about this initially, you know, when we started 30 years ago, without dating ourselves too much, we'd have to sit there and print out all the manuals and then post out all the manuals and then stand by the fax machine waiting for our forms to come back in and all those sorts of things, which didn't allow us the capacity to take on all the other elements of it. We've now got and a large amount of what we do is admin heavy, but I think processes and systems, all those sorts of things have allowed the sort of more admin heavy stuff to not take care of itself by any stretch of the imagination, but have become more efficient and effective in the ways that they're being done, which allows us that opportunity to sit and look at the wider picture and not just be someone who's filling in a spreadsheet. Although I do love to fill in the spreadsheet still.
I mean,
who doesn't?
right?
Don't we all?
But I agree. Liz, let's come to you on this one.
Yeah, so I really agree with Miri and Corina that within operations, we are transforming, and there's two angles we can look at. It is because of expansion and let's call it scope change within our roles and also perception, but it's also due to economic disruptions. If you think about the past decade, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we've had political disruptions, and everything that comes into our market will impact our customers, our exhibitors, our contractors, and our internal team members. So I see transformation as giving us the ability to always think on our feet, to always see change as an opportunity and start to kind of broaden out our skill set. As Miri and Corina said, operations, they aren't delivery functions. They are essentially connected to everything we have, whether it's experiential, whether it's digital add-ons, whether it's product thinking or feature development. Operations have to be involved. They are the glue of the business. So make sure you're really kind of seeing those opportunities to grow. If you don't know it, learn, because that's often what comes with change. You don't get a guidebook, and even leaders, they don't get guidebooks. It's all about coming together and forming something that works. And when it stops working, that's a good point where you just iterate and you change it. So operations is changing and transforming. I hope and see it for the good, but it does come with some difficult turning points when you have to adapt your workload or your skill set at times.
And it feels to me that we're at a bit of a cusp at the moment where everything is changing. You know, we've got big global challenges in terms of politics and economics and logistics disruption. We've got a big shift in audience behaviours, and that's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger as my 18-year-old ventures into the world. I see how much our events are going to change. So leads me on to my next question really nicely. Thanks, Liz. Which is, what are the challenges? What do we need to become to deliver the events of the future? I guess in the future, that could be in the next year or two, but I'm also thinking kind of, further down the line into the 5-10 years. We've transformed away from the administrative or transforming away from the administrative function, which I guess technology is only hopefully ever going to play a good part in that. But where does that leave us? Where do we need to reach towards? Miri, I'm coming to you first on this one.
I think, and this is for the benefit of everyone, not just for ops, is we need to be at the table right from the start. If we are involved in the planning of the delivery, then we are much more effective in adapting when things come up, when when something has to change. It allows us to help formulate, certainly in the position I'm in, and I think we've worked as also ops tend to work across a lot more shows and a lot more different styles and different events. I sort of joke that I took an idea from Drag World and took it into our data show. Now, you wouldn't think that those two things would work together side by side, but there's always things that you're learning on all these different shows. Whereas I think sales teams and commercial teams and the marketing teams do tend to be more sector specific, quite rightly, is by allowing us there, we can help develop and transform those events. And when it comes to the point where, let's be honest, ops are the first ones that get called when there's an incident on the street, when the war breaks out. How do we get out of our contract, Miriam? And how do we get people back from wherever they are? Those sorts of things. If we're involved right from the start, we've got the knowledge of the contract. We know if the flights are changeable, or we suggest those sorts of things as well. So I think that's something that we really need to push at. Now, there's some organisers who are fantastic at it, but there are some organisers who aren't aware that that is an option for them, that actually bringing ops in early will help them and will support them and help them develop further.
Yeah, because when I think about when I try and describe, kind of, well, what does ops do, or how is there's very few other departments that really, well, there isn't another department where that's responsible for delivering everything that's talked about that event, whether that's the marketing delivery or the commercial delivery. Ops touches, like you say, all of it, and we work across lots more shows as well. So the data bank that ops holds, I think, is a treasure trove for the C-suite kind of levels that they've not necessarily tapped into. Corina, you work in a big organization and kind of have that kind of insight, and you do have that seat at the table. So where do you think we need to what do we need to do to become ops for the future?
Yeah, I think Miriam's point of having a seat at the table early and at the beginning is crucial, both at the top but also like event levels, obviously, and making sure that part of the leadership teams of the events operations is up front and center, having a voice, not just a reactive voice either. A proactive voice is very important. But I think there's probably more than 3 buckets, but I think we need to look at, obviously, becoming protection specialists, so protecting the business like we're expected now to protect the business like we've never been, like never before. I reeled off some of those things, and there's more than that, and we're expected to know those specialisms in great detail. We also need to lean into revenue generation. We need to look at how we can, because there's loads of things that we can do that we're already doing half of it. So let's identify those and claim them and highlight how we can maybe grow them, and have that view of how we're supporting the event from a revenue perspective as well as a delivery perspective. I think that's something for the future. And also experience masters, like I think we're getting better at that as an industry. I think when I came into the industry, I think I'm about 18 years to 20 years in now. I need to calculate, but when I first came into the industry, and I was like, I always worked on business to business events, and I didn't understand why we needed to look so boring. I'd come from outside of, started as an admin person, and I was like, why does it need to look like this? Why can't it? And I'd been to the Ideal Home Show with my parents years before, and I was like, why can't it be fun? Like, I don't understand. So I think we've got better at that as an industry, because this whole return on experience is vital. But we need to lean into, I think those 3 buckets are key. I'm sure there's more, but like moving forward, really lean into them. And what does that look like for each individual business? Because it will be slightly more for some and less for others.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I think we've probably all said at some point that ops don't have the authority or the kind of position at the table because we're not revenue generating. I do think that's a big element to kind of unlock.
I think that's that. I'm just sort of thinking back to my time at Clarion and some of the commissions that we negotiated on exhibitor extras, on all those sorts of things, were coming out at more than some of their larger shows. Yet we were still labelled, and this is 20 years ago, with the ops are just here to spend money thing. And it's like, well, actually, we're generating, but it's not recognised always as revenue generation. And I think if some of these teams sat down and looked at what they were generating in terms from what they'd negotiated, there'd be. You have that. We're already doing this to a certain extent, but it's not necessarily getting recognised at the levels it should do.
Yeah, and I think that retention bucket of cash, I think, is something that we, as ops people, need to focus on, because it's all very well and good getting the contract in, but keeping the contract and not having to get another new one in next time because you've already got one that's re-signing. I think ops need to claim more of that retention commercial side of things. Liz,
but also, sorry,
I
was going to say, but our part as well in making things like rebook easier. If we make the exhibitor's life easier, they're more likely to rebook. Sorry, I want
absolutely.
Liz, your turn.
Liz,
no, this is a really good conversation to have, and I think all three of us have really similar experiences about having not only a place at the table, but our cutlery laid out and our plate ready to go. I think that is so important. I think for the future, it doesn't matter where you sit on the kind of pathway of operations, whether in ops management, experiential, senior management, everyone has to have a desire to be commercially aware. Going back to Corina's point about protection, about that level of pressure to protect audiences, disruptions, like it all comes down to operations, that they're the first person to get a call. It also links back to commercial drivers. So having a broad interest and desire, not day to day, because that kind of makes you absorb more, but having a real interest and wanting to understand how different departments operate, what the pricing strategy is, the sponsorship strategy, and the return is really important, because essentially operations protect the business. It's a high percentage over overheads of our costs, and that's super important to know that operations have that skill to negotiate, to bring back cash that you probably don't know, because we do everything quite quietly and very humble. To make sure that we're just really becoming commercially aware, and that should be a string to our bow. It used to be all about networking, learn. Now it's all about make sure that you're getting that commercial exposure. And again, if you don't know what it means, I think it's really important to ask and lean on your mentors, your manager. Get together with the finance team, set up a working group with finance and your contractors, so you can always be protecting the business and improving your budget acumen is really important.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I love all of those. So I've specifically chosen the three of you because you come from such varied organizations and have such different experience across the industry. So I want to just talk about how ops might be transforming and the challenges in different organizations, and if we're transforming in the same way depending on where we're coming from in our background. So what are the key challenges around being in a independent organizer, Liz, and in a kind of small to medium sized company?
That's a good one. And I'll answer this with honesty, because I think it's really important within operations to have that kind of honest delivery mindset and realistic approach when you are thinking about joining an SME, especially if you're like me, coming from a global and big corporate background. You go through a bit of a journey to kind of really understand the differences, because you can easily make assumptions. Miriam's nodding, because your clients, you will know the difference. But SMEs are a really great place to be, deliver, mature, and also start in. But SMEs need breadth. They need you to have the ambition, the ability to sometimes juggle multiple plates, be willing to go down different pathways. That's not traditional operations, as we might have known it a decade ago, even 5 years ago, and to push opportunities. And automatically, I believe, in my experience, it might be different for some, you already have a seat at that table when you are part of an SME, because you all have the same outcomes. Yes, at times it means you might have no guidelines, no SOPs, no budget frameworks, but that is for the operations team to start shaping. So you need breadth. Whereas if you're at global and large corporations and FTSE 100s, I actually think you just need clarity and accountability, because what you gain from SME at times, if you don't mind me saying, you might lose from a big organization, because you've got your specialists and you've got your departments and you've got your resource and you've got your process flow. So if there's anyone listening thinking, where should I go? I remember I listened to a podcast, and I think it was an SVP of Pepsi, so not in the industry. And they said, for you to learn the most, you should experience all different environments. So see SMEs as a good place for advancing your skill set and your knowledge. I certainly have, but it does come with its challenges. Challenges. I sometimes call Lou.
Yeah, call me. I do remember going from I think UBM or Miller, whatever it was at the time, into Penton, and I remember the Penton was like the fly by the seat of my pants kind of operation. Like, you just, it really taught you a lot, but I was so glad to have that grounding of a more corporate organization to learn to do. My first 3 years on was brilliant, because I knew kind of more process driven stuff, and then went to Penton. It was like, whoop, here we go.
Put your hat on.
Yeah, exactly. Corina, let's come to you next.
Well, I think neither or have cracked it or nailed it. Like Liz was saying, there's positives and challenges to whether it be independent, larger corporates or freelance. I think, with the larger organizations, you've got the structure, you've got the scale, and you've got the protection and clarity, I suppose. Although I have to fight for that as well sometimes, that happens as well. I think, independence to maybe the SMEs bring, the speed, maybe simplicity in some respects, certainly the adaptability. And I think that the bit that I would like to see on the side of on the corporate side is more the simplicity and the being able to pivot, because that's hard. That's just even using like AI, giving you an example, right, which is key, and I'm sure hopefully we'll come on to talking about AI a bit more, but even with like AI, our company uses Copilot. That's really the only AI that we should be using with regards to, if we want to upload any of our internal documents and compare things and help create better processes. But Copilot's not really, where it's at right now. There's other, Claude would be great, and to pivot that is like turning the Titanic, right? So that's where I'm sure the SME and certainly Miri can be like, tomorrow, right, I did, I'll cancel that one and I'll get that one on. And that's the luxury that we don't have. But then we have lots of kind of SOPs and accountability and support and protection on one side. So yeah, I don't think neither of any have kind of cracked it. I think there's positives and challenges. I think learning from each other would be amazing. If there was a forum or a way we could kind of learn from each other, because I think simplicity and how we deliberately spend our time is something I think we can all learn and help each other perfect.
Yeah, I think as you were saying that, we've got in the Ops Nest, we've got like a Google Sheets of all the various tech that kind of we come across and that people learn, kind of you start using, and I would say the majority of that tech list is freelancer fed, in terms of like new technology, 100%, like you say, because having come from kind of a freelance independent ops company myself, you're right. If something's not working, it's business critical, that I find the quickest way to make that work, because the food on my table is directly correlated to that working the best possible way. There's a real proximity there.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think we had a chat separately about that, and to that point, that all the freelancers I've worked with, the way they're using AI, I'm like, oh my God, that's just, it's like blowing my mind. Yeah. Because, and they're doing it out of absolute necessity, that they've learnt this way. Because, and I was saying to, Miri, when I was saying to you, like, I know, freelancers out there that are doing 10 days a week in 5 days a week, like they, because they're able to do that, because they've, I think that, I don't know if this is similar for Liz, but we struggle. The biggest challenge for us is time. The want to embed AI, learn AI, I think is there. I think is totally there. For me, what I witness is the time. It's being able to carve the time out. There's a need to run leaner teams, be more effective, more efficient. And when do we take that time, that true time, to really learn these kind of platforms and what we can do with them? That's what we're struggling with, I think, from the corporate side.
And I think they, having been down multiple rabbit holes just for the Ops Nest, I can't even remember how many weekends now that have been lost down an NA10 rabbit hole, for example, or an automation, or some form of tech rabbit hole. If you are not in the position of having that, kind of motivation to create the leanest business possible, or have founder mentality of like, I don't mind losing my weekend down a rabbit hole because my business is going to benefit. I think those are some of the things that play in. So yeah, leads nicely into you, Miri.
Well, first of all, can I have that tech list, and I will meet you down the bottom of that rabbit hole, because I do love a good bit of tech, and it's exactly on the reasons Corina said. If I find a new piece of tech, it's up to me. I mean, the flip side of this is it's all self-taught. I have some very weird YouTube algorithms for various bits of tech and whatnot. But we are able to adapt, and we are able to use that. I think what I'm sort of hearing here is across the board, and I do have that experience. Corina, if you want to learn all sides, come over to the freelance side, because we do exactly what Lou's saying. I can sit in Reed offices with their processes one day, and I can sit in a small independent, which I've got going on at the moment, and have to sort of teach them about processes. So I'm getting this brilliant sort of surround sound of all options. But I think the biggest challenge that all of us are facing across the board is resourcing, and having the right resources and the right level of resource. However lean we're trying to make our teams, it's finding the resource and holding on to the resource. Certainly one of the biggest requests we're getting at the moment from everyone we speak to is, we haven't got the resource at the sort of lower levels. I mean, that level sort of naturally moves on and progresses quite quickly, which does make it harder for the consistency for teams. But I don't think we're getting enough people into the industry to allow us to develop and then sort of allow everyone to progress above by sort of backfilling, or bringing in experiences from other industries to teach us about best ways to use the AI and best ways to streamline our processes. I think that's something we're not great at as an industry, is looking outside our own industry. I think there's a real perception of no one gets how we do it, and to a certain extent they don't. But there is always things that you can learn from other industries. Like you, Liz, I listen to podcasts with all sorts of SVP from here and SVP from there. And whilst it might not be 100% relevant, the ideas and the thought processes and the processes are there, and there for us to crib.
Well, funnily enough, my next question was around what are the biggest challenges. So resourcing, definitely top of the list. Why, Miri, why do you think we are struggling to get younger or that junior level in?
I don't. If I had the answer to that, Lou, I would hope we wouldn't be in that problem. I think I think it is a high stress job, and that's not for everyone. are we in the right places? Are the courses out there? This is not including OpsNest, the right courses for people. You know, I've interviewed many people who have done event management courses. Half of them don't know about exhibitions, and half of them don't realise quite how much work goes into it. And then when they have to do the work, it's not.
Yeah, it doesn't align with expectations. Yes. I mean, and I'm on the other side of it. I can kind of see why we do a lot, and which is, I think, one of the reasons why we're starting to see specialist roles kind of coming in now, you know, around customer experience and around security and things like that, because actually I do think we have been absorbing a lot and expanding a lot, and at some point there's I think there will be some form of fracturing of role under the umbrella, hopefully. But yeah, Liz, what about you? What do you think the biggest challenges are right now?
I'm going to give two.
Okay.
So I do agree with Miri that resource is a challenge, no matter where you work and what size and where you come from, whether it is the freelance industry, the specialist industry, or your in-house operations team. And I do think that is because we as leaders and groups and allies need to be an advocate for our industry. There is not enough people talking about the career pathways, where you can go, the earning potential. I think we've got really transparent with growth within sales and marketing and content. You can go onto any website, look at the value prop, look at careers pages, and you can go, oh, I know where I'm going to go with that. I can be the CMO. But there's not a lot talking about that pathway to maybe the COO or the MD, which actually a lot of people either come from an operations background or a marketing background. So I think we have a lot of work to do to really kickstart getting people back in the industry, because it's an easy entry place to get to, and you can learn so much, and that then you can diversify. If you want to leave operations, you shouldn't, but you can, and you can go into different streams. And the second one is clarity. So Corina, you spoke about AI. I was thinking, do I talk about AI or not? Because I think we're also in that place where sometimes we can get a little bit of AI fatigue, because the options and the opportunity are endless, but I think it's clarity. So in operations, it's sometimes hard to break down the noise. What's important revenue wise? What's important customer experience wise? What's important actually to my own internal team and my own business? So I think, again, for us to get better and better and better, which we always do, because in operations we like to be transparent and break things down and, you know, almost build out our own operating model, or as Corina said, SOP. But I think we need to kind of build in the structure that operations are at the top, and they fundamentally feed into every single element of the business, even finance, even data, everywhere, and make that a principle. So then there's clarity for everyone to really understand what their purpose is. And once you've got that clarity, that's when you can go off different streams and specialisms. I can use a real example. My previous company and role, it was working at the operations level with the operations function, but we actually broke it down into different elements. It was your operations team, your customer success team, which actually then became the huge frontline team, where they alleviated that pressure of operations, because operations can't do both. If anyone listening to this or watching back knows a way, please let all of us know. Want to know. And then that design function, really important. So making sure there's clarity. And I think that will help with the resource and our professors and the future event operators that will essentially lead this call in many years to come.
Exactly. Fabulous. And Corina, what about you? What are the biggest challenges?
So I do think resourcing is there. I'm not sure it's the top one, but I'll just mention that as well, because from my perspective, I do think that we don't do enough with the universities, with groups out there of people looking at apprenticeships and internships. We don't do enough to publicise the exhibition industry, and we've only got ourselves to blame for that. And we need to think about how we come together and do that as an industry, because that's the only, the festivals is what's when they're doing event management degrees, they're excited by the festivals, let's face it. You know, that's where they picture themselves. You tell them about an exhibition, it doesn't sound as sexy, and they don't even know what it is. You know, I've seen people who have come out of event management degrees before, and you know, they expect to go straight in at event manager level, and that's also down to how the tutors are managing their expectations. So, you know, it's I think there's work to be done there, and I think we all as an industry, as a community, could look at how we do that better. I think for me, I've mentioned it a few times now, certainly from the corporates, it's definitely time to change, time to adapt and to change. I do believe it's a necessity, becoming a necessity for us to really have a look at, you know, business to business, event to event. What do we need to do to adapt for the future and change? I don't think we should stay doing the same things that we've always done, but we need that time to kind of sit back. Now, you know, we've probably got, we carve out gaps in the calendar where we've got maybe a few months where we can do stuff, but I try and cram in training at that time and do various things, because otherwise obviously we're super busy. So time is an issue, and I know it's in our control, but it's something that we need to lean into and look at more of purposely making sure we use that time really well to adapt and change. I think I think is the key thing.
Yeah, I think when because we work in an industry where every event is different, there's so many variables on the event, almost the back of house, that what we do almost then has to stay the same to cope with the number of variables that we then play with in the events. And I agree, I think that infrastructure, that way of doing something, that's not change, like it's really hard to change that, because we're constantly on a cyclical basis with all these other projects that we have running. I just want to mention, because Tam and Fee would kill me if I didn't at this point, that the Ops Nest has a free 1-year scholarship for anybody coming out of education or currently in education or just thinking about coming into the industry. So a year's membership of the Ops Nest, totally covered by us, you know, is part of our, in the same way we do these sessions, 3 sessions for free for everybody. But also, so anyone listening or know of anybody, you know, your nephew or your, you know, whoever it might be, if they're interested in getting into operations, send them my way. We'll host them in the Nest for a year, and then hopefully they can learn and then get to meet you guys. Because one of the things I really struggle with is the number of job roles that come kind of towards me in my direction, and the disconnect between us bringing people in, I think is massive. Right, we've only got 2 more minutes left, and my final question is thankfully a very quick one, which is, what would you like to rub out and draw again? And this is a question we ask everybody at the end of every Let's Talk, and at the end of the year we look at what everybody said. We've had everything from cable ties to Donald Trump, and so I want to know what your answers are. Liz, what would you like to rub out and draw again?
What would I like to rub out? With a big rubber, I think it is stop boxing ops into delivery. Why, if we put that box around ourselves, then we're limiting ourselves. So make sure we rub that out, and operations is all the way from a leadership function to embedded SMEs and specialists across all different departments. So rub it out, go bigger, go bolder.
Brilliant. Liz, oh sorry, not Liz. I was looking at Miriam and said Liz. Miriam, what would your rub out?
I don't think mine's too dissimilar to Liz's. I would like to rub out this sort of perception of a adversary relationship between sales and marketing. That doesn't need to be there. We are all part of the same team, all trying to deliver the same thing, and actually it all works much better if we work together.
Exactly. How magical is it when that communication, that connection is strong? You know, you deliver such a great event when
it's so much more fun.
The trilogy of sales, marketing, and operations are kind more aligned. 100% agree. Karina, last but definitely not least.
Mine is 2 quite practical things. More the bit random. I've got 2, but one is the phrase shell scheme. I would love for that to go away from the. When I came into the industry, it took me ages to admit that I had no idea what they were talking about. Why we call it shell scheme? Nobody else knows what it means.
Did you find out in the end?
There's an
well,
art.
yeah, it took me a little while. It took me a little while to pluck up the courage because I've been working there for a little while. But yeah, no one else knows what it means other than us. So I think I would love for that to not be there anymore, but I think it's so embedded that's probably impossible. And the other one would be exhibitor manuals. I think need completely scrapping and restarting, because you can't tell me anybody loves them. And we've done them like that since the dawn of day. And I think it needs to complete refresh. I haven't got the answers, but I'm just putting it out there.
I 100% agree. I cannot understand why an exhibitor manual can't be bespoke enough to get down to 2 pages for a basic exhibitor. Okay, fair enough if they're doing loads more than 3 pages, but like it is ridiculous.
We don't have the time to write them, let alone them have the time to read them.
Exactly. But I am going to just end on the only reason why I wouldn't want shell scheme to be binned as a word is that when I used to do events in the Netherlands, my favorite contractor at the time asked me one day if we could go for a smoke behind the shell scheme. For that reason.
Okay, that's the only reason we need to keep them in the industry then.
Exactly. And on that note, on that very serious note, I just want to say thank you so much, Corina, Liz, Miri. Thank you to Bruce and the team over at Translatable, and thank you to Unity for hosting us. And thanks to all the Ops Nest members for keeping coming up with ideas that they want us to focus on and to learn more about. We've got some great stuff around creativity coming up in the Nest over the summer with an upcoming Ops Table event that we're doing. So everyone keep an eye out for our socials that a lovely Tamla does, and we'll get you booked in on the next thing. So thank you very much, everyone.